The smoky cantina on Station Omega-9 buzzed, with nervous energy as young warriors from across the galaxy gathered around a scarred table. Red emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the air recyclers hummed constantly, mixing the scent of exotic alien beverages with the metallic temps of recycled atmosphere. Kata single quotes, VAR. A battle-worn Thraxian with deep claw marks across his scaled face set down his drink with a trembling hand. His three eyes, once bright amber, now held the dull sheen of someone who had seen too much. The cybernetic implant where his left horn should have been pulsed with a faint blue light, marking him as a veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts. Around the table sat representatives of a dozen species. A young Xantari female with iridescent wings, folded nervously behind her back. Two Corvin brothers, their rocky skin still unmarked by battle scars. Several Nexian scouts with their large black eyes reflecting the dim cantina lights. All of them were fresh from the academy, their weapons still shiny, their armor unblemished. You want to hear about the humans? Kethfer's voice was barely a whisper, forcing the others to lean closer. The background chatter of the cantina seemed to fade as if the entire station was holding its breath. You think war is glorious? You think your training prepared you for real combat? Tell you about real terror. The younger soldiers leaned forward eagerly, their drinks forgotten. They had heard rumors of the Terran Wars, whispered stories in the academy corridors, classified reports with entire sections blacked out. But few survivors ever spoke of them openly. Those who did usually ended up in psychiatric wards muttering about the human smile and refusing to elaborate. One of the Corvin brothers, his voice deep and rumbling like an avalanche, spoke up. Come on, old-timer. Humans are barely 5 feet tall. They have no natural weapons, no armor plating, no enhanced strength. Our briefings showed they can't even see in the dark properly. Kethfer's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile. That's exactly what we thought. Our intelligence networks had been watching Earth for months before first contact. We saw their primitive kinetic weapons, their slow chemical rockets, their fragile bodies that broke from the smallest impacts. He paused, taking a long drink from his glass. The liquid inside glowed faintly purple and steam rose from its surface. My first encounter was on Kepler 4, Kethfer began, his three eyes growing distant with memory. The cantina's noise level dropped even further as other patrons began to eavesdrop. Beautiful planet, really. 3 moons, purple oceans, crystal formations that sang in the wind. We were part of the Thraxian 7th Fleet, 43 ships. Strong. The humans had established a mining colony there. Maybe 3,000 settlers. The Xantari female spread her wings slightly, a nervous gesture among her species. 3,000 against 43 warships? It's not even a fair fight. No, Kethfer agreed, his voice hollow. It wasn't fair at all, just not in the way we expected. He stood slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. Years of combat had left him with a permanent limp, and his left arm hung slightly crooked where it had been reattached after a plasma blast nearly severed it. We thought they were weak. Small creatures with soft pink skin that bruised if you looked at them wrong. Our intelligence said they had primitive weapons, no natural armor, reflexes slower than a Thraxian hatchling. He laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the cantina's metal walls. We were so wrong. The cantina fell completely silent now, except for the constant hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of ship engines docking at the station's ports. Even the bartender, a massive Gorlian with 4 arms, had stopped cleaning glasses to listen. Their leader was named Dongwu, just a human male, average height by their standards, maybe 5.5 feet tall, brown hair, dark eyes, nothing special to look at. When our advanced scouts first spotted him, they reported back that the humans had put a child in charge of their defenses. Kethfer's claws scraped against the table's surface, leaving thin grooves in the metal. But when we moved closer, when our ships entered the system and our sensors got a better look, that's when I saw him clearly for the first time. He was standing on the observation deck of their main habitat dome, watching our fleet approach. 43 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, armed with plasma cannons that could crack a moon in half and this little human was just ... watching us. The Thraxian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And then he smiled. Not a grimace of fear or the snarl of a cornered animal. A genuine smile, like he was greeting old friends. Like he had been waiting for us to arrive. It was his eyes. His eyes were calculating, measuring, planning. Kethfer shuddered, his scales rippling with the remembered fear. That's when I knew we had made a terrible mistake. The attack on Mining Colony 7 was supposed to be routine, Kethfer continued, his claws scraping against the metal table with a sound that made everyone's teeth ache. The scars on his face seemed deeper in the cantina's red lighting, and his mechanical eye whirred softly as it adjusted focus. Our ships outnumbered theirs 3-1. We had plasma cannons that could melt through their hulls like hot knives. Through butter, the young Corvin warrior leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his rocky weight. 3-1 odds against humans? That should have been over in minutes. Kethfer's laugh was bitter and cold. That's what Admiral Dexkar said right before he ordered the attack. Clean sweep, he called it. Be home in time for the evening meal. Poor bastard never made it home at all. He paused, taking a long drink from his glass. The purple liquid seemed to glow brighter as it passed his lips, and steam continued to rise from its surface. Around them, the cantina had grown so quiet that the sound of his swallowing was audible. We dropped out of hyperspace at 0600 hours, ship time. 43 vessels in perfect attack formation. The humans had maybe 14 ships defending the colony, and most of those were converted cargo haulers with welded-on weapon mounts. Their biggest ship was maybe half the size of our smallest destroyer. Kethfer's 3 eyes seemed to look in different directions as he remembered that day. I was weapons officer aboard the dreadnought Talon's Edge, best gun crew in the fleet. They said we could hit a target the size of a dinner plate from 1,000 kilometers away. As the Zentari female's wings fluttered nervously. What happened when you opened fire? It's just it, Kethfer said, his voice growing hollow. We never got the chance for a proper barrage. The moment we entered weapons range, the humans did something no military academy in the galaxy teaches you to expect. He stood up slowly, his damaged leg making him wince as he put weight on it. The cybernetic components in his knee joint clicked softly with each movement, but the humans didn't retreat. They didn't try to run or hide behind the planet's gravity, or call for reinforcements. Instead, they charged straight at us. 14 little ships against 43 warships, flying directly into our formation like they were trying to ram us. One of the young warriors snorted with disbelief. Suicide run? It's desperate, not tactical. That's what we thought too, Kethfer replied. Our tactical computers couldn't make sense of it. No battle algorithm in the database had any response. For an enemy that would deliberately destroy themselves for no strategic gain. The old Thraxian began pacing behind his chair, his damaged leg dragging slightly with each step. We opened fire, of course. Plasma beams lit up space like a solar flare. We vaporized 3 of their ships in the first volley, turned them into expanding clouds of superheated gas. He stopped pacing and gripped the back of his chair with both hands, but the others kept coming. They flew through the debris of their own destroyed vessels, used the plasma clouds as cover, and somehow made it into close range before we could reload our main batteries. The cantina's lights flickered momentarily, and somewhere in the distance, our ship's engine fired up with a deep rumble that vibrated through the station's hull. When we breached their outer defenses with boarding pods, a female named He-Jin appeared on our communication screens. She was standing in what looked like the colony's main control room, and she was covered in blood. Her own blood, from the look of it. Deep gashes across her forehead, one arm hanging useless at her side, uniform torn and scorched. Kethfer. Scales began to change color slightly, shifting from their normal deep green to a paler, sickly hue that indicated extreme stress among his species. And she was laughing. Not the hysterical laughter of someone who had lost their mind, but genuine amusement. Like she was enjoying herself. Like this was the most fun she'd had in years. The young warriors exchanged worried glances. The Zentari's wings had folded completely against her back now, a defensive posture that indicated fear. She looked directly into the camera, blood still streaming down her face, and she said in perfect Thraxian, "Welcome to hell, boys. Hope you brought sunscreen." Her accent was flawless. Better than some natives speak it. Cuthbert's mechanical eye spun rapidly as he recalled the scene. Then she held up a small device in her good hand. Just a simple remote control, the kind you might use for an entertainment system. "See you on the other side," she said. And she pressed the button. The silence in the cantina was now absolute. Even the background hum of the life support systems seemed muted. Their entire station exploded. Not just the main facility, but everything. Habitat domes, mining equipment, landing pads, storage tanks, even the orbital communication relay. They had rigged their own home to detonate, taking out half our invasion fleet with them. The young Corvin's rocky features had paled to gray. They destroyed their own colony, their own people. But here's the terrifying part. Cuthbert's voice dropped to a whisper that made everyone lean forward. Some of them survived the explosion, and they kept fighting. "That's impossible," protested the young Zentari soldier, her voice cracking slightly. "Nothing could survive a blast that big." Cuthbert slowly rolled up his sleeve, revealing deep scars that ran from his wrist to his elbow in parallel lines. "I got these scars on the surface of Colony 7, 3 hours after the explosion, from a human who should have been dead." His voice became distant, almost hypnotic. "I watched a human male named Jamin crawl out of burning wreckage with both legs gone, dragging himself toward our position with a live grenade in each hand. The blast had cauterized the wounds, so he wasn't bleeding out, but he had to be in agony." The Thraxian's entire body began to tremble as he continued, and he was singing. Actually singing as he crawled through the rubble. Some human song about going home, his voice clear and strong like he was performing on a stage instead of dying on a battlefield. Cuthbert's claws extended involuntarily, scraping against the chair's metal back. He made it within 5 meters of our position before we finally put him down with concentrated plasma fire. It took everything we had left in our power cells. And even then, even as his body was being consumed by the energy beams, he was still trying to throw those grenades. The old warrior's voice broke slightly. "No creature should be able to fight like that. No sane being chooses to die that way when there's no hope of victory, no chance of rescue, no strategic purpose to their sacrifice." He looked around the table at the young faces staring back at him. That's when I realized we weren't fighting soldiers. We were fighting something else entirely. Something that didn't follow any rules we understood. "After Colony 7, everything changed," Cuthbert said, his voice growing hollow like an echo in an empty tomb. The mechanical components in his damaged leg whirred softly as he shifted his weight. The scars across his face seemed to pulse with their own rhythm in the cantina's flickering light. "We thought we were fighting a war, traditional warfare with battle lines, strategies, victories, and defeats. But the humans? They were hunting us." He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the metal floor with a sound that made everyone wince. His movements were restless now, like a caged animal that could smell predators nearby. Command called an emergency meeting after we lost half the 7th Fleet. Admiral Korthax himself flew in from the home system, bringing reinforcements and new battle plans. "We thought we just needed bigger guns, more ships, better armor." Cuthbert began pacing around the table, his damaged leg making his gait uneven but determined. "They had this female commander, Su Bin. Never saw her face, never got a clear image. On any sensor reading, only heard her voice over intercepted communications. Soft voice, almost musical, speaking perfect Thraxian, with just the hint of an accent that made it sound exotic rather than foreign." The young Zentari warrior leaned forward, her large black eyes reflecting the cantina's red emergency lighting. "What made her so dangerous? One human against an entire fleet?" Cuthbert stopped pacing and turned to face her. She turned warfare into an art form. While our commanders were studying star charts and planning grand battles, she was thinking. Like a hunter studying prey. He resumed his restless movement, circling the table like a predator himself. The first sign was the food. 3 days after Colony 7, warriors on 6 different ships started getting sick. Not all at once, not dramatically. It's just slow weakness, fatigue, difficulty concentrating during combat drills. The old Thraxian's claws extended slightly as he remembered. Our medical teams ran every test they could think of, scanned for biological weapons, chemical agents, radiation poisoning, nothing. The sickness seemed to come and go randomly, affecting different crew members at different times. One of the Corvin brothers spoke up, his rocky voice rumbling through the cantina. Sounds like normal space fatigue. Long deployments do that to everyone. That's what we thought too, Kethra replied with a bitter laugh. Until our chief engineer discovered the truth. While we slept, her teams would slip aboard our ships like ghosts. They'd reprogram our food synthesizers to produce meals with just slightly wrong mineral balances. It's not enough to kill, not enough to detect easily, but enough to slowly weaken us over weeks. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant hum of the station's artificial gravity generators. But that was just the beginning. While we celebrated what we thought were victories, destroying empty human ships and capturing abandoned outposts, she was already 3 moves ahead. Every victory was a trap. Every abandoned base was rigged with surveillance equipment that tracked our movements, recorded our communications, analyzed our tactical patterns. Kethra's mechanical eye began spinning rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among modified Thraxians. We'd capture a human supply depot and find detailed files about our own operations. Battle plans we'd made just hours earlier. Personal information about our crew members, psychological profiles that were more accurate than our own military records. The cantina's lighting flickered again, and somewhere in the walls, metal groaned. Under the stress of docking procedures, but none of the warriors moved, transfixed by the old soldier's tale. How could they be everywhere at once? Asked the young Corvan, his voice barely above a whisper. Because they never stopped, Kethra replied, his pacing becoming more frantic. That was the thing we couldn't understand at first. We need 8-hour rest cycles. Our entire military structure is built around that biological necessity. Combat. Shifts, command rotations, maintenance schedules, everything synchronized around the need for sleep. He stopped abruptly and slammed his fist on the table, making the drinks jump and slosh. Humans work in shifts. Some sleep, while others hunt. They created a 24-hour cycle of constant pressure. When one team got tired, fresh humans took over. They never gave us a moment of peace, never let us rest, never stopped coming. The Zentari's wings had begun to tremble, an involuntary response to stress. How long did this go on? Months, Kethra said simply. For months, we never had a moment of true rest. They would whisper our names in the dark through the ship's communication systems. Somehow they'd hacked our personal files and would tell us about our families back home. Describe our worst childhood fears in perfect detail. His voice became barely audible, forcing everyone to lean closer. They knew things about us that we'd never told anyone. Private thoughts, secret shames, dreams we'd had as children. Subin's voice would come through the speakers at random hours, soft and gentle, talking to each of us individually like she was our oldest friend. Kethra's hands began to shake as he continued, the cybernetic components in his damaged arm clicking softly. She'd describe our home cities in perfect detail, talk about the weather patterns on our birth worlds, mention family members by name and ask how they were doing. Always friendly, always caring, like she genuinely wanted to know. The old warrior's scales had turned completely pale now, almost translucent in the dim light. But then she'd add little details that she couldn't possibly know. What our mothers cooked for dinner last week, what our children had said before bed, what our mates were dreaming about while they slept. Impossible, breathed one of the young warriors. That's what we thought, till we realized they'd been watching our home worlds too. Surveillance satellites in orbit around every major Thraxian planet, monitoring our personal communications, tracking our family's daily routines. Kethra stopped pacing and gripped the back of his chair with both hands. I remember the day we found Commander Vextal. He was our bravest warrior. Had led 1,000 battles, decorated hero of 3 major campaigns. We found him in his quarters, sitting perfectly upright in his meditation chair. Completely unharmed, but catatonic with terror, The cantina seemed to grow colder as he spoke. His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. He wouldn't respond to commands, wouldn't eat, wouldn't even acknowledge our presence. He just kept repeating one word over and over. Teho, Teho. Kethfer's voice cracked with emotion. We never learned what it meant, never found any human by that name in our intelligence files. But something about that human, some encounter we never understood, has broken our strongest soldier without even touching him. The old Thraxian looked around the table at the terrified faces of the young warriors. That's when we realized we weren't fighting an enemy. We were being stalked by apex predators who understood us better than we understood ourselves. The siege of our homeworld lasted exactly 97 days, Kethfer said, his voice barely audible now, like the whisper of wind through a graveyard. The cantina's background noise had completely stopped. Even the bartender had abandoned his cleaning to listen, his 4 massive arms hanging motionless at his sides. Not because we lasted that long, not because our defenses held out or our warriors fought bravely, because that's how long the humans decided to give us. The cantina was dead silent, except for the steady thrum of the station's reactor core somewhere deep in its belly. Kethfer's mechanical eye had stopped its constant spinning and now stared, fixedly at a point somewhere beyond the cantina's walls, as if he could still see his homeworld burning in the darkness of space. Thrax Prime, he continued, his voice gaining a dreamy quality, like someone recounting a half-remembered nightmare. Beautiful world. 2 billion souls living in crystal cities that reached toward the sky like frozen lightning. Our capital spire was so tall it actually touched the edge of our atmosphere. Poets came from across the galaxy just to see the sun rise reflecting off its faceted walls. He moved slowly back to his chair, each step deliberate and painful. The cybernetic components in his leg were making new sounds now, soft clicks, and where's that suggested the machinery was struggling under stress. On day 1, our orbital defense platforms detected a single human ship approaching the outer system. It's just one vessel, smaller than a diplomatic courier. Our automated systems didn't even register it as a threat. Standard protocol was to challenge it for identification and escort it to the quarantine station. Kethfer's claws began to extend and retract rhythmically, a nervous habit he'd developed since the war. But before we could send the challenge, a human female named the Gin contacted our high command directly. Not through normal communication channels, not following any diplomatic protocol. She somehow accessed the emergency frequency that only our top military leaders knew existed. The young Zentari warrior's wings were now wrapped completely around her body, like a protective cocoon. How could they have known classified frequencies? It was just the beginning, Kethfer replied with a hollow laugh. She spoke our ancient language better than most of us. Not modern Thraxian that we use for daily conversation, but the old ceremonial tongue that only scholars and priests still studied. Her pronunciation was perfect, her grammar flawless, like she'd been born speaking it. He reached for his drink with a trembling hand, but set it down without taking a sip. The purple liquid had stopped glowing and now looked dark and lifeless in the dim cantina light. She gave us a simple offer. No negotiations, no terms to discuss, no room for compromise. Just a simple choice. Surrender completely and unconditionally, or watch our son die. Impossible, breathed one of the young warriors, his voice cracking with disbelief. No one can kill a star. Stars burn for millions of years. They're too massive, too powerful. Even our most advanced weapons couldn't scratch the surface of a sun. That's exactly what High Command said. Kethfer nodded slowly. Fleet Admiral Karethvax himself laughed when he heard the transmission, called it the desperate bluff of a defeated enemy. Let them try, he said. Stars don't fear the ambitions of tiny creatures. The old Thraxian stood again. But this time his movements were slow and deliberate, rather than restless. He walked to the cantina's small viewport and stared out at the swirling nebula visible beyond the station's hull. Then we detected massive human ships moving toward our system's edge. Not warships with guns and missiles, not invasion craft carrying troops, construction vessels, enormous things the size of small moons, with industrial equipment we'd never seen before. His reflection in the viewport showed a face that had aged decades in the span of a few minutes of storytelling. They were building something around our sun, piece by piece. Massive structures that dwarfed anything in our engineering databases. Our scientists worked around the clock trying to understand what we were seeing. Kethvar turned back to face the gathered warriors, his mechanical eye now spinning so rapidly it created a faint worry sound. Our home star is a G-class yellow dwarf similar to the human sun they call Sol. Stable, predictable, with a lifespan measured in billions of years. It had warmed our world since before our species developed language, before we learned to make fire, before we reached for the stars. The cantina's lights dimmed slightly as if responding to the gravity of his words. Somewhere in the station's depths, machinery groaned under the stress of maintaining artificial gravity and atmosphere for thousands of inhabitants. By day 30, our scientists confirmed it. The humans were constructing a stellar engine. A device so massive and complex that it defied everything we thought we knew about physics and engineering. They were going to move our sun out of the system, leaving our world to freeze in the darkness of space. The young Corvin warrior's rocky features had turned an ashen gray. Move a star? That's not possible. Energy requirements alone would be beyond calculation, Kethvar finished for him. That's what our physicists said too, right up until they detected the gravitational anomalies starting to affect our sun's position. Tiny changes at first, barely measurable, but growing stronger each day. He began pacing again, his damaged leg making soft mechanical sounds with each step. But that wasn't the worst part. Oh no, that wasn't even close to the worst part. Kethvar stopped directly in front of the young warriors, his three eyes focusing on each of them in turn. On day 64, a human male named Wu Jin appeared on every screen across our planet. Every communication device, every entertainment system, every computer terminal, even screens that weren't connected to any network. Devices that had been powered down for years, ancient equipment in museums that hadn't functioned in decades. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to lean forward. He looked directly into the camera with those strange human eyes that seemed to see right through you. And he smiled that terrible human smile, the same expression I'd seen on Dongwu's face before Colony 7.
Ow.
The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Then Kethvar continued, his words falling like hammer blows in the quiet cantina. "This is just Tuesday for us," he said in perfect Thraxian. "We have similar projects around 47 other worlds." Then the screen changed and he showed us. Stellar engines around every major population center in our sector. Around the Corvin home system, around the Zintari breeding worlds, around the Nexian research colonies. Kethvar's entire body began to tremble as he relived the memory. All connected, all synchronized, all controlled by human hands. They showed us technical specifications, construction timelines, operational parameters. They had been planning this for years, maybe decades, building the infrastructure to remake entire solar systems while we were still arguing about trade routes and border disputes. He collapsed back into his chair, suddenly looking far older than his years. They weren't just fighting us. They weren't trying to conquer us or enslave us or steal our resources. They were remaking the galaxy itself, moving stars like game pieces on a board too large for us to comprehend. The old warrior's voice became barely audible. And the most terrifying part? They did it all with the same casual efficiency they used for everything else. It's like rearranging furniture in their living room. It's like it really was just Tuesday for them. The surrender came on day 97, Kethvar concluded, collapsing back into his chair like a marionette whose strings had been cut. The metal groaned under his weight, and his cybernetic components sparked briefly before settling into their normal rhythm. But not because we were defeated. It's not because our defenses failed or our warriors gave up. It's because the humans decided they had made their point. The cantina's air recyclers hummed louder now, working overtime to filter the tension that seemed to hang in the atmosphere like smoke. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled slowly as the station continued its eternal orbit. But inside, time seemed frozen. He held up his remaining arm, the scales along its length pale and scarred from old injuries. Where his other arm should have been, there was only empty space in the collar of his tunic that had been specially tailored to accommodate his missing limb. I spent 2 years in a human prison camp after the surrender. That's where I learned the truth about what we had been fighting. The young Zentari warrior's wings fluttered nervously. Prison camp? They kept prisoners? Oh, they kept us alive, Kethper said with a bitter laugh. Fed us, gave us medical care, even provided entertainment and educational programs. But it wasn't mercy, not in the way we understood it. It was something else entirely. He shifted in his chair, the movement causing his mechanical leg to whir softly. My guard was a quiet human female named Biora. He barely came up to my chest. Even when I was sitting down with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see everything, she never raised her voice, never showed anger or cruelty. Just did her job with the same calm efficiency humans brought to everything else. The old Thraxian's 3 eyes grew distant as he remembered. She taught me their language, their history, their poetry. Hour after hour, day after day, she would sit with me and patiently explain human culture.
Ow.
I thought it was some kind of psychological warfare at first, an attempt to break my will or turn me into a collaborator. Kethfer's claws extended slightly, scraping against the table's surface. But as the months passed, I began to understand. She wasn't trying to break me. She was trying to help me understand what we had been fighting against. You know what I discovered? The warriors waited in terrified silence, their drinks forgotten, their weapons hanging unused at their sides. They don't fight from hatred, Kethfer continued, his voice gaining strength. It's not from anger or bloodlust or the desire for conquest. They fight from love. Every single human in that war was fighting to protect something precious to them. Their families, their children, their future, their way of life. He stood slowly, his scarred form casting long shadows in the dim cantina light. The mechanical components in his body clicked and whirred as he moved, a constant reminder of what the war had cost him. Biora showed me pictures of her home, small blue-green world covered in oceans and continents, with cities that glowed like jewels in the darkness. She had 3 children and a mate who worked as a teacher. She'd been a poet before the war, writing verses about the beauty of sunrise over water and the laughter of children playing in gardens. The cantina's background noise had completely stopped now. Even the bartender stood motionless behind his counter, all 4 arms hanging still. As he listened, when I asked her why she had joined the military, why she had left her peaceful life to fight in a war that could have killed her, she looked at me with those strange human eyes and said, "Because if we don't fight, who will protect the children's?" Laughter. Kethfer's mechanical eye spun rapidly, the only sign of his internal agitation. That's when I understood. When a species can love that deeply, can feel that protective instinct, not just for their own offspring, but for abstract concepts like beauty and joy and hope, they can wage war beyond any comprehension. He began moving toward the cantina's exit, his damaged leg making his gait uneven but determined. The human named Minho, who took my arm during the interrogation process, he cried while he did it, actually wept tears that ran down his face because he said it was necessary for the information but not right for the soul. The young warriors watched in stunned silence as the old Thraxian gathered his cloak. He told me that his species had learned long ago that survival sometimes required terrible choices, but that didn't make those choices any less terrible. Then he spent the next 6 months teaching me to use a prosthetic arm, working with me every day until I could function. Normally again? Are they still out there? Whispered one of the young soldiers, its voice barely audible above the hum of the station's systems. Kethfer paused at the cantina's entrance, his silhouette framed against the corridor's brighter lighting. Oh yes, they're still watching, still remembering every world, every battle, every face. Their surveillance networks monitor every major trade route, every military installation, every diplomatic meeting. He turned back to face the gathered warriors one last time. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. The truth that haunts my dreams and makes me check the shadows wherever I go. They could have killed us all. Every single one of us. They had the technology, the weapons, the strategic position, to wipe out entire species without breaking a sweat. The old warrior's voice became heavy with a mixture of terror and grudging respect. Instead, they chose mercy. But that mercy came with a price that we're still paying. We exist now only because they allow it. We have our freedom because they decided we deserved it. We rule our own worlds because they permit it. Kethfer stepped into the corridor, his mechanical leg clicking against the metal deck plating. Remember this, young ones. Never mistake human compassion for weakness. A species that can choose to forgive when they have the power to destroy can also ensure you never forget the lesson they taught. His voice echoed back from the corridor as he disappeared into the shadows. And somewhere out there, humans like Dongwu, Haijin, Subin, Teiho, Dajin, Wujin, Bora, and Minho are still standing guard, still watching, still remembering, making sure the galaxy never forgets the price of threatening what they love. The cantina remained silent long after Kethfer's footsteps faded into the distance. The young warriors sat motionless, staring at the empty chair where the old Thraxian had been sitting, each lost in their own thoughts about the implications of what they had heard. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance, but somehow they seemed different now. Less distant, less safe, as if somewhere among those points of light, patient human eyes were watching and waiting, ready to remind the galaxy once again that some species fight not for conquest, but for love. And in the depths of space, where the darkness between stars held secrets that few dared to contemplate, the Watchers continued their vigil, ensuring that the peace they had chosen to grant would never be taken for granted again. The Inn.